All right. Hopefully you're going to be able to see me there. Is there anybody who can't hear me speaking?
Everything's fine.
Thank you. That was Janie from beautiful
Right.
Colorado. So we are going to be talking about urinary tract infections today. And, you know, sadly to say, it's mostly the women that are affected by this. I was talking with somebody and it's like, no, it's a lot of anatomy is connected with this. So this is a little bit more of a ladies program. I did see some ideas that men can have urinary tract infections, but usually that seems to be something that's passed on from maybe us women, so we're mostly concentrating with some ideas that actually would affect either or, so this will take care of everybody, but ladies, it's mostly us that are affected by that. And most of you probably know that. So I'm probably talking to the choir because so many women do have urinary tract infections. So just to remind you, don't forget the website is wavwatch.com. And I do have the Facebook group where you can go to later that it's recorded, and you can see Wavewatch Frequency Fanatics. So you will be able to check that out. And then we always have to cover the disclaimer. I know you get tired of this, but I have to be so careful and say that we are not diagnosing anything. The Wavewatch is not used for a medical diagnosis, but if you've already had a medical diagnosis, or you in your own self-care think that you have a particular problem, we had to have a way to name it so people would recognize it. So some of the names do sound medical, but you're going to be using sound frequencies, which are still considered experimental. And the Wavewatch is not FDA approved or considered a medical device. And anytime somebody shares a testimony with me, it's strictly volunteer, and no one has been paid for that. So that kind of covers that. So we're just going to jump right into it. Women's selections is where you're going to go to for a lot of this idea. And you could still, like I say, if your partner or male has some problems, some of these would be also very, very good. So these are the frequencies that we could be using very specifically if we think that we have a problem with the UTI. And I'm not sure if I mentioned already, or I've kind of forgotten where I'm at here, but basically at least 1 in 4 women are going to have a UTI, and sometimes it repeats and repeats. Now, we also have yeast infections, and so there's some confusion on what we've actually had. But basically, these would be the ideas for a urinary tract infection. And I was a little confused, and I thought I needed to make sure on the wording. The number 1 under bladder and urinary tract says estrophy. And I thought, gee, did I spell that wrong? And when I looked that up, that's basically something from birth, where your bladder is not formed correctly and could actually be on the outside of you as a baby. And so I thought, my goodness, they actually have a frequency for that. And then it's tied together with a fallen bladder. We know most women have heard of somebody that has had a fallen bladder, but the estrophy one was very unique. And I am still amazed that they have been able to measure a frequency for that particular problem. Of course, I don't have any testimonies on that, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what that was. So anytime we have some problems, this would be your go-to area. And I've had so many testimonies on this, and I think sometimes women just tell me, in person, or they may not write as much of a written testimony for me, but just be sure that this idea has been helpful for many, many women, and it's our go-to for something if it's going on in our system that we're not sure what it is, because it covers a lot of ideas. So basically, this infection, a urinary tract infection, it could be anything. It could be viruses, fungus, or bacteria. So it's not going to hurt you to also follow up with those specific folders when you're working on clearing out a UTI, or again, if we tie it into just a yeast infection, maybe it's, and sometimes we have both at the same time, women, we know this. So you're covering all the bases by going ahead and accessing the fungi, viruses, and bacteria that are on there, because these are all connected. Now, viruses are a little bit more connected with lower UTIs and cystitis, and specifically people that might be immunocompromised. I found this idea that said the BK virus, and I do not believe I have a frequency for the BK virus, but I do have frequencies for the adenovirus and the cytomegalovirus that are predominant pathogens in a lower UTI infection. So with this idea, you might have to look around just a little bit. If you've played the top 2 or 3 folders, if you've already played bacteria, if you've played viruses, if you've played yeast, and if you've played some of the UTI things and you're still having some problems, you might dig a little bit deeper. That's what this idea is about. So you would go to the pathogen list, and that's specifically where the cytomegalovirus is, because it's a cancer-causing one. And then I forgot to actually mention this one, but the adenovirus, if I'm saying that right, or the adenovirus, that one is actually in our weight loss. So that virus is connected with, they say, about 30% of weight gain. So that's why it's in there. So I'm sorry that, I don't have everything everywhere. I'd have 9,000 frequencies on here. I just had to make a decision and put them in where I thought it was the most valuable. You can also play the viral detox. Don't forget that if you are working on trying to get rid of some bacteria, some fungus, and viruses, anything, we need to detox our bodies. We don't want to kill something and then just let it stay in our body. That doesn't do the trick. So we need to play the detox folders, but very, very specifically the lymph nodes, the liver, and the kidney detoxes. Now, I tried to build those detox ideas into those 3 folders specifically, so that if you don't forget, or if you forget, that it's already in there. But it doesn't hurt you to go to the detox folder, specifically that icon, and play every single detox ideas, because things change. They say that when you kill a parasite, we're not talking about those right now, but just for example, when you kill a parasite, that it releases some heavy metals. So sometimes people get really itchy when they do a parasite detox, So that's just the idea that came to mind. That's why I was trying to say, to cover everything when you're trying to work with that. Now, again, many, many testimonies. I can't claim anything, but women are really having some success with this. So I hope you're seeing that these are the specific types of bacteria. And again, I put these in a couple different folders. E. coli is in the bacteria folder in several different places. The Proteus, I do not have that specific. That's why I do have a general bacteria frequency set. So it would be covered in that. And then the same way that with the Klebsiella pneumonia type idea, it would be covered more under general bacteria. But now the staph and strep type ideas are actually in the colds and flu folder. And, as you learn, you see more and more ideas. But if you want to be very specific, if you want to be very particular because you're having trouble and just the general folders for bacteria didn't work, then the staph, strep, and streptococcus are in the flu folder, the colds and flu and sore throat folder. But you can find those without a lot of looking if you have your little booklet. So I'm hoping everybody has their little booklet here so that you can see those kind of things. Now, again, these are the, just a look at what I just said. So the bacteria and the staph and strep is in easy self-care. So that will get you right there. I'd actually forgotten I made this slide. I described it, and then here's my slide to tell you what to do. So the staph and strep, again, is in sore throat and strep, and that would be in self-care. So cover all those ideas if you need to. But seriously, I've had so many women say they just do the UTI one, or they just do incontinence. They just do those bladder and urinary tract folders, and that seems to take care of it. But we want to have everybody armed with information, so that if something doesn't work for one person, it might work for somebody else if you go just a little bit deeper and do another folder. And that's the ease of working with the Wavwatch, is that we have enough things that you can try something different. You don't have to run downtown and, go to the pharmacy or go to the, a health food store or go somewhere and try to figure out what else to take. You have several different selections built into the Wavwatch. And I so appreciate everybody here today. I know that most of you know all of this stuff, but I'm just trying to give you some more information here. It is easy to do it with trying again. Like this morning, for some reason, I had a little bit of an upset stomach as I got started. And so I started to go get some crackers, and I thought, oh, I'll just, what have I got on my Wavwatch? Duh, And so I muscle tested, and I actually ended up with a chakra. So I was playing something, and I seem to be doing okay right now. So anyway, it is pretty interesting how even, I've got something right on my hand, right on my wrist. And my first instinct with my stomach being upset was to maybe, get some crackers. But that's what the Wavwatch is for, because you may be traveling down the road when something happens and you can make it easy. Now, you could have a yeast infection or a UTI. So this is a little bit different, and I've kind of talked about this. So basically, women, we're going to try to identify it just because of location. So a yeast infection is going to be more on the outside of the vagina, where when we go to the bathroom and it really hurts, up inside us, that's more the UTI. But again, sometimes we have both ideas. So that's why it doesn't hurt to play all of the ideas on the Wavwatch. Cover the bacteria, cover the fungus, cover the viruses, because you could have a combination of anything. And our immune systems are compromised today, without saying a lot, just because I think people are very reactive. We're trying to clean everything. We are, going crazy with cleaners, with being fastidious on washing our hands, and, the list goes on and on. Where that old, little story about, you let your kids play out in the sand pile, just so that they build up immunity. And we've taken a lot of that immunity away with our cleanliness. So our body is not being worked, and it's not using the built-in innate ability that our body has to try to keep things at bay. So we are actually handicapping our body, in my opinion, by using too much hand cleaner, by using too much of such and such. And I'm not saying that anything, about our political climate at all. I'm just saying we are so over the top with cleanliness sometimes that we cause some of our own problems, and our body doesn't know how to react when something does happen as good as it should. So despite the body's natural defenses, which I just mentioned, we've handicapped our natural defenses. Certain bacteria can line the urinary tract and get up in the urethra, the bladder, and the kidneys. So I thought this was a pretty neat picture for us to be able to visualize. So the majority of the UTI cases are from E. coli. And E. coli is in the pathogen folder. It is a cancer-causing bacteria. So this bacteria is one that you really want to, try to work with. So again, that was my segue, is play through the pathogen folder. And sometimes maybe we're keeping things at bay. I have no idea, but I hope that you've kind of glommed onto that idea and that you're using the pathogen folder at least once a month, and trying to make sure that your system is fairly clean of things that are known to cause different kinds of cancers. Of course, I'm not saying that we are curing anything, but hopefully we are kind of slowing down things, and we're giving our body a chance to do what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to use its natural defenses. It's supposed to do that. So I think frequencies help. They don't hinder. They're not like a prescription. They're something natural. They're not going to cause your body other problems. So I know you're with it, gals. So these are a few more ideas. It gets just more and more. These are some causes of UTIs. And when I first started looking at doing this presentation today, I'm going, oh my gosh, this could be a little bit too personal. So I'm trying to just do it very, very slowly here. But kidney stones can be one of the first things that can cause UTIs. So if you're a person that has one or the other, they kind of go back and forth, it seems like. And here's the fun one, our underwear. So ladies, some of the things that we wear really can be so constrictive, or not cotton, not the cotton that we need to be touching our body. So be careful with that. Make sure that you got the right kind of underwear that's not too tight. And, just a little aside here, I'm getting silly today, but I have heard that one of the latest surgeries that they are doing in Hollywood is to work on our vulva, because the women are wearing the tightest pants and tights. And so they're trying to do surgery to remove a fold here and there that might show with tight pants. So I don't know if you've heard that little tidbit yet, but I can't even imagine what they do to themselves when they have surgery in that area, and then they wear something tight that usually is not going to be cotton. So if we can mess up ourselves with underwear, just think what we can do when we start having surgery and wear tighter and tighter non-cotton fabrics close to our body. I hope you appreciate that little rant. I was so surprised to see that. And you don't have to think too far of the women that are doing it in Hollywood. All right. Constipation is another one that causes the UTIs, because things are blocked up, and then, nothing is flowing through correctly. Lack of water. Of course, we know that one. We've been told that one a lot of times. So we need to drink adequate water and flush it through. We're going to talk about menopause here in just a little bit on a deeper slide. But when we start through menopause, our whole body changes. And so that's why there's the connection there. Diabetes. Did you know that uncontrolled diabetes can really be connected with UTIs? So, so many problems that we are causing ourselves sometimes, or that just happen because of sugar, obviously. That gets things started, gosh, I don't know what to say about this next one. Holding in your urine, I think we all do that, and I don't know where the stopping point on that is or how that can be improved. But, ladies, hey, we all get in a situation and pretty soon, we are just running for the bathroom. So that is one. So if you get to that point, where you're running, then play through all of the UTI things. I've had to do that a couple times, and I was so thankful, that I had something at my finger or on my wrist to try to work with that. So if you get to that point, start doing something. Don't wait to protect yourself. Another idea is our feminine products. And I may have told this idea before, but these products that we're using are not necessarily good. So I hope you're getting the best quality, the organic cotton, whatever you can do for your feminine products. I'm way beyond that. But ladies, if you just muscle test a little tiny Q-tip made of cotton, which would be similar to a feminine product. If you muscle test that, there isn't anybody who's their body tells them that it is not good for them. I just think that is so fascinating that our bodies know. And then when if you want to muscle test a feminine product, your body is going to say no to it. And that, unless it's a very good, like I said, organic one, free of cotton, because the chemicals are so bad in there. And who knows what else is, on some of those things when they harvest it, and the list goes on and on. So those products can be very causative of UTIs. And then, of course, the obvious one that I probably could have started with is just sex. So obviously, we're exchanging fluids and all kinds of things in this activity, and it can cause problems too for both people. So we need to be careful, and we'll be talking about that just a little bit more. So I did mention that if you are menopausal or going through menopause, that basically it changes. So the pH of our vagina changes, and bacteria and yeast sometimes can just, zoom right in, hone right in on that change. And so we may have more problems at that menopause cycle or stage. I don't know of anybody personally, don't really have any stories, and I don't know that we need to hear them, but just to know that the UTIs, you may have done nothing wrong except celebrated a birthday, so times change and our bodies change. And just a little clue to you, ladies, they say our hormones change majorly every 10 years. So I've still had women who are cycling at 60 years old. I've had a 75-year-old lady, I believe, telling me she was having hot flashes. And, it's like, wow, there's still things going on with our hormones until the day we die, So we'll be looking for those ideas, and knowing that, just because we celebrated another birthday, it can change our body. So I hope I'm not going too fast. I hope I'm not boring you, but we're going to have lots of pain symptoms when there's UTI, burning sensation, running to the bathroom, some actual deeper ones. If you've got those first three, hopefully you're going to act on it right away. That's why you've got the Wavwatch. And so hopefully none of these other ideas would come onto the scene. So when you have muscle aches, abdominal pain, that's kind of hard to pin down, because, hey, maybe you exercised that day, or you took a 5-mile walk instead of a 1-mile walk. So you're not quite sure what it is right there. Again, feeling weak and tired, that might not tell you anything about a UTI. But then when it gets worse, your urine can appear really cloudy. You might even have some pink blood or some, blood in your urine. The smell could be off, some pelvic pain. And so those are all important ones also. But again, like I said, to me, if you start working when the top three, if you have something, one of those sensations, that's when you get right on it. You don't wait. You really try to work with it right away. Now, I have one more to talk about on this particular slide. And I'm not sure exactly how much to say, but I want to let you know this is so important, especially in nursing homes. If you can see confusion or delirium in elderly patients, that is huge. So if you have somebody that you're around, an elderly person that actually is starting to get very, very confused or delirious, it could be a UTI. And that is one of the number one things that bother people in nursing homes. And because they are in, elder care, what word you want to say, that slips by. And it slipped by in my own father. He was in assisted living and he got pretty delirious. And then the owner and the nurse in charge actually took him to a doctor and says, I think he has a UTI. And the doctor said no and didn't even test him. He gave him something else. And I can't remember what it was. So the nurse took him back to senior living. She took him back 2 weeks later. The doctor still did not think that it was a UTI and told her no, sent her home. I believe it happened a third time. This nurse, she was fabulous, took my father a third time and said he has a UTI. This time, the doctor tested him and said, oh, you're right. But it's already septic. There's already sepsis. There's not a lot we can do about it. So my father did pass away from a UTI. And do you know who I heard the story from? The doctor. The doctor actually told me this story. And he said, yes, the nurse brought him and I did not test for this. So this the one little line here, confusion or delirium in elderly patients. If you don't learn anything today, learn that UTIs are common among elderly patients. I mean, how could it not be when you think about it? It's hard for them to go to the bathroom. It's hard for them to clean themselves up. The list gets on and on and on. They hold it longer and longer. So it really should be common sense that this is going to be a big problem in our elderly care. So wear your Wavwatch when you go anywhere and be helpful to people. And then maybe share it with somebody at a assisted living. And I've tried to do that a couple of times, but it's very hard for them to put a Wavwatch on somebody and do all of their other chores and jobs and, nursing, whatever you're talking about in assisted living. So to me, it falls upon us to take care of our loved ones a little bit differently. And unfortunately, my father, was 500 miles from me when this happened. And, I didn't even have the Wavewatch, developed at that particular time either. But it's such a learning process to know that the Wavewatch could be so helpful. All you have to do is put it on UTIs or put it on yeast infection, put it on bacteria, put it on, run some things. And you can do that within the scope of a visit when you're with somebody in elderly care. I know that I had a statistic in mind I wanted to share, but just to close this idea up, many, many people in elderly care die from UTIs that are undiagnosed. because their main problem is confusion, delirium. And when it gets to that stage, it's gone through all of those other symptoms and nobody's paid attention to it, except in the case of the lovely nurse who helped my father and tried to get that taken care of. Anyway, I hope that was informative. And like I said, if you don't learn anything else, that's the thing to learn. Well, here we go. One more step. Antibiotics may not be the answer. 1 in 3 simple UTIs is now considered resistant to the most common antibiotics used to treat them, Bactrim. So 1 in 5 UTIs are considered resistant to other antibiotics. Well, I wish I could be a teacher here and see a show of hands, but how many of you think an antibiotic would work very well on a UTI? Yeah, we do have a bacterial connection, but we also have viruses and we have yeast and other things. So it's no wonder that Bactrim doesn't work for every instance. And now we are getting obviously antibiotic resistant. So antibiotics may not be the answer. So we need to know, we need to have something that's available. So I know most of you on this group are going to run for your Wavwatch if you can. But here's a few other ideas that might be helpful. So run for the Wavwatch. There we go.
Now, let's say that we have somebody who we want to make a second playlist
And I'm
for.
trying
Maybe
to get out of this
wife
one. Okay, so that one was a playlist, and I think everybody's got that, but maybe I should have thought about that just a minute. I can play that at the end for everybody also, but that is telling you how to make a playlist, and that would be some information so that if you need to put E. coli that's in the pathogen folder, if you just wanted to add it to another list, you could do that. And this would be a time with UTIs, if you are working and none of the obvious things worked, you know, don't forget that you could make a playlist and put together the E. coli folder, the cytomegalovirus, the viral support. You know, you could do some things like that also. So I just didn't want to take up too much time. I think most of us have seen that video a couple of times, but I will play it at the end, I think. I've got a couple testimonies here, and you could have been reading them while I was talking, but you know, some people are definitely feeling some things when they do have problems. I thought this one was kind of neat. I could feel a slight electricity in my jaws, top of my lungs, an odor in my mouth, not a taste, but a smell. Some sensations at various places on my head, and she did tell me later, I guess I did, that she was definitely having some improvement with it. But this, I wanted to show this one with you because sometimes you have no idea if something is helping. You are feeling something, and then you may have to wait a day, you know, and then all of a sudden you think, oh my gosh, it is gone, you know. So that was kind of why I put that one up there. So she was having some incontinence problems. And like I said, when you feel something, it usually does change. And then somebody else gave me a testimony. She was having trouble with even swelling feet, loss of urine, and 30 minutes after using the prototype for kidney problems, her urine stream seemed better and the edema in her feet was much better. So, you know, the list goes on for testimonies, but just want you to know that you are creative women and creative men, and we can do more than one thing on the Wavwatch. You know, if plan A doesn't work, to work with just the bladder and urinary tract problems, or maybe even into the women's section and reproductive issues. If those two obvious folders don't work, again, You are great at using the Wavwatch and learning and adding to it. So then you go on to bacteria, viruses, and yeast, and you can keep doing that. So it's very important that we do keep working if we need to. And then say the urinary tract folder, as you played through it, seemed to do the trick. Then our next question is, well, how long do I play that? And my suggestion is several more days, but it's not usually a week at a time. It doesn't mean that you have to play it or take it for 10 days like we take antibiotics. It's usually fairly quick, but just to cover the basis, play it for 2 or 3 days maybe, and then give yourself a break, and then maybe, play it again a week later, play it, but don't overplay it or play it all the time. It's not a necessity to do that. And I don't know exactly how to tell you, because there's no way to measurement and everybody is so unique, but we don't want to, listen to the same song that we can hear an actual song. We don't want to listen to that same song 24 hours a day. So your body doesn't want to listen or feel the same frequency 24 hours a day either. But that is why I did build in so many rotational ideas that you can do. And then those frequencies are a little bit different. So I kind of make a point, and then I make the point that, but if, so on the Wavwatch, I've tried to build in some things. So again, don't just pick one frequency and play it 24 hours a day, but play the whole loop of something that might be in a folder if you think that works for you. And again, we've talked about muscle testing. You can do that. And it's an individual tool for your self-care. I think I'm winding down. I did see a couple more ideas here. I thought this was really cute. One idea that we haven't really talked about is warm heating of the abdominal area is supposed to be good. So that would be fairly helpful if you're having some problems. Be very careful of your equipment. Some of the things like a heating pad that we used to use a lot, they're plugged in. I don't like those anymore. A good old fashioned water bottle is what you need, nothing that's hooked up to electricity. And then a few more tips, drink lots of water, but stay away from coffee, alcohol, soda, citrus juice, and teas that have a lot of caffeine, because they can be irritating to the bladder. So, that might be hard for some of us to stay away from caffeine. So you do want to maybe minimize it if possible. That's an easy thing that we can do. If you're going to be in pain, and you have a UTI, you're going to do some things. So staying away from caffeine is an easy tip. These are some natural ideas. So cranberries, raw garlic, probiotics. Obviously, those are going to be good anytime for so many things. But vitamin C, oregano, clove essential oil, and myrrh essential oil can all be really good for working with UTIs. And a lot of us know cranberries anyway. We're drinking cranberry juice, and that's a great one. Why can't we include more of those ideas? We just need to eat to the best of our ability and be able to have that food on hand. I think that's the big thing. I keep cranberry juice on hand, but if I have forgotten to buy it, that wouldn't be something I could pull off the shelf. So it might mean you had to go to the grocery store, and if you don't have it written on your list, you might forget that. So anyway, that's why the Wavwatch is so handy, because you may not have all of those and you've got something on your wrist to use. Another idea that I think is women, we all talk, but we love our coconut oil. So I may have one more slide, but coconut oil is really good for all kinds of bacteria. But they're saying that there's no evidence that coconut oil helps. But women, we know it does. So, use a lot of coconut oil in your life and in your extracurricular activities. Is that the way I can say it? Because that's very, very helpful. And not sure what happened there. So that must be the last slide that I had. But don't forget, you can use the coconut oil. It is very antibacterial. So I'm going to try to go back and just kind of finish it up. So if anybody needs a tiny break, what I'm going to do is play a video to show how to set up a playlist. And then basically when that's done, I'll open it up for, talking a little bit. But just in case somebody hasn't seen this and is having trouble with their screen or setting a playlist, this is some information.
Now, let's say that we have somebody who we want to make a second playlist for, maybe a husband and wife, or maybe you're sharing this watch with somebody who's in assisted living, like my mom, and can't do it herself. So we might want a playlist made and all ready to go. So basically what we're going to do is a little bit different. We're going to find the particular idea that we want, and I'll show you this again with maybe just a little bit different idea. So if we wanted to go to chronic, we could go down to chronic fatigue, and we could touch that one. Now this is a little bit different right here. Instead of putting it in the heart folder, you have to touch the menu bar. And then you very carefully go down. This one just goes one at a time, and you'll see add to playlist. So you'll touch add to playlist. And then you'll see your 3 playlists there. So we're going to add this to playlist number 2. And when I touch that, it opens up and it says chronic fatigue, yes or no. So you're going to touch yes, and it's now gives you a signal it's added to playlist number 2. Now, if I want to remove this, I have to go down 1 arrow, and it will give me a choice of which playlist. And then it will say remove from playlist, yes. So that's a pretty easy one there. Now, if you want to add it to playlist 3, not too hard now. You're going to add that to playlist number 3. If you want to take it out, you're going to remove from the playlist right in those particular areas. So playlist 2 and 3 go through the home screen, and you arrow down to add to playlist or remove from playlist. Hope that helps you.
Okay, so I hope that was helpful, and I think we're open now. We had several on the program today, and I just really appreciate every single one of you coming and staying. I'm actually wondering how much longer I can keep these up. I've gotten around 40 presentations, and so I may be kind of fading out just a little bit because I may need to figure out what else to talk about. I've talked about a lot of things and don't want to bore you too much. But anyway, does anybody have any comments that they'd like to make? It can be on the topic or anything that that's happened since I've talked to you last. And by the way, it's nice to see Glenda. And Lolly, I just saw them the other day in Manhattan, Kansas. So thanks, ladies, for coming on. And then Ann was at my office, and I'm going to go back to Colorado to see Janie, and I see Lena once in a while, and I see Linda, and so LV, I'm not sure. Where do you live at? And I'm not sure, so because I just see initials. So I don't know if I've seen you lately. That's all I was trying to say. So anyway, any comments from anybody?
Yes, this is Janie.
All right,
And
Jane.
I was going to give you an idea about your stomach problem this morning. Go to stomach nausea on your self-care.
I muscle tested that, and it didn't work in chakras. No, but I
do it
muscle
anyway.
tested.
I'm sure it works. I mean,
yes.
Within a few seconds, why all that's gone. And food poisoning also has a tendency to do that. I found out.
Oh wow. Okay.
You can drink anything, just try anything that has to do with that. It works.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm maybe bragging on the Wavwatch, but we have choices in anything.
Right.
We can try more than one thing. I didn't have to run to my medicine cabinet. I didn't have to, blah, blah, blah. So, so it's important that we have choices. So that's what we have the Wavwatch for. And then it helps that somebody reminds us too. So thank you so much, Janie.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to say I appreciate you doing these Zooms. I've learned a lot, and it helps to talk about the watch more intelligently. So thank you.
Thank you. Somebody just put a text up and I missed it. I can't find it. There, maybe there it is. Okay. So thank you so much for Linda Valen. LV, I was at a blank spot there. So I've seen all of you recently. So ladies, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate that. Anything that anybody else wants to share? Any comments? Because I don't want to take up your time. And yes, go ahead, Linda.
Yes, I was going to say that the doctors had told me to, use the coconut oil even internally in the vaginal area because it helps with dryness. And also eating, what do you call this? Soybeans, but you need to get them, if you can, organic. And that helps somehow nourish, so you're not as, I guess it's something to do with the estrogen to help with that, so you don't have as much dryness. And I found that did help. It's hard to get organic soybeans to chew on,
The edamame, is that?
Yeah, you could use that too, but I found that it really did. I did notice a difference.
Wow. Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I mean, ladies, it's ladies here, but we are recording live on Facebook, but you can't say enough about coconut oil in the bedroom. There's not a better thing to say. Have fun. Okay, Glenda.
Thank you for going over the yeast protocol. And would that work also for yeast in the intestine?
As far as I know, it would. That would be, my guess. I don't have any scientific proof, but just testimonies from people. Oh, yes, it did go away,
Yeah, I'll work on that one. I've tried other things, but that was kind of my problem. And yeah, I didn't find exactly yeast for intestines. So I'll try that out of the UTI.
Just in general. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I can't stress olive oil enough for about everything. I probably drink a tablespoon about every day. And that has helped me more than anything that I know of on any problem, any place. And eventually my ears, the wax in them or whatever is in your ears will eventually turn sort of watery if you kind of get enough in your system. And that's how I kind of decide about how much, if I got too much or whether I don't. And it seems to work. So I'm sure it oils everything else too.
Yeah. I like that because, some people talk about, they're always, trying to get something out of their ear and it's hard as a rock. And Janie, I hadn't thought about that. Mine is really soft, so just what you said is very interesting.
Well, that's one way I can really tell if I haven't taken any for a while. Just check my ears a little bit. If it's dry, well, you better take some more.
And that's what women can do, is share great ideas. So that was a great one. Anybody else want to comment or say anything?
I just have a quick testimonial. Sure. I did use it for urinary tract infection and it worked.
Do you know how quick?
In hearing what you said, I should have called you at the time, but I just did it for myself. And then when I felt better, I stopped. And then I thought, is it coming back? So I did that. I should have done it more consistently in a few days like you did. I just did it once and it seemed like, wow, magic, it stopped. But I I needed to do it more. And then I tried some other E. coli or different things, but
So you did, okay.
all clear and all fine, and no antibiotics, no doctors, no nothing, all good.
Wow. You know, and I just think that as women, if we share more and more ideas, we get healthier and healthier, you know, and it's so fun to be able to share, try this, because we are starting to worry about the antibiotics. You know, why go? They don't work anyway. You know, I don't mean to say that. I mean, you should go to your doctor. I said that wrong, but you know, why take an antibiotic, you know, the Bactrim, if it's not working anyway, you know? So, but that might be the only thing that they know to give us. So it's our, you know, so now all of a sudden it's our responsibility to figure out what to do if the doctors don't know anything. So
yes, it is tough. During that time, I had friends that were saying, I have some antibiotics I can give you that are left over. You really need to go to the doctor. You got to go get them. The push from the people around me was like, go to the doctor. What are you doing? Get the antibiotics, go straight to that. And so I just had to stop talking to them.
Another little tidbit, I learned this from the Chinese doctor that does a lot, or excuse me, he's a physicist that measures a lot of frequencies. And, you know, he could measure the frequency in a chemical prescription, you know, and then he could measure the frequency in a natural product and tell you that, well, yeah, they are similar frequencies. That's why the chemical prescription is mimicking the natural product. You know, that's what they've done. They've mimicked natural products to make a drug. And in his measurements, he said, yes, this one would work because it mimics the natural food or, you know, product. But he said, oh my gosh, the side effects, the cost to your body. And, you know, he just reiterated, went over and over that if you have captured the frequency from the, you know, and the real product, why would you mess with a prescription if you have the same thing in a frequency form? And it goes into your body. That was the last thing. It goes into your body just instantly. That's our big word, but it's actually 4.3 times the speed of sound is how fast these frequencies go through our body. Where the chemicals, it takes a lot more of them because they're bound. And I think he said, you know, it takes them 8 times longer. That may not be quite right, but the version is it takes a lot longer for a chemical frequency, again, a chemical frequency to get into our bodies. So with a lot more damage sometimes because of that particular prescription that we're using. Yeah. All right. I got on my high horse again.
I get that's the best thing about the Wavwatch. I don't have to deal with side effects.
I like that. That's great. Maybe I should grab that little idea. I don't have to deal with side effects when I use frequencies. Perfect. Well, we are definitely winding down. And again, I really appreciate your time. So I know within just a couple of weeks, I have to assign another code or a link. They only let you do 20 at a time the way this was set up. So that will be sent out to you. So within a couple of weeks, you'll have to be looking. And I may have some other guest speakers on because I'm going to be traveling a little bit more in October. But again, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Anything else, ladies?
Thank you, Linda.
Don't forget nursing homes, elderly people, UTIs. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.